Imagine being kidnapped on your daughter's birthday, locked up for 15 years with no reason, and just that, released with no explanation, given 5 days to find the truth that destroys him completely. This is Oldboy, the film that broke Korean cinema wide open and still haunts everyone who watches it. Let's dive right in. The story begins with a man named Oh Dae-su. Dae-su is an ordinary office worker. He's not rich, he's not particularly intelligent, and he's far from disciplined. He drinks too much, behaves irresponsibly, and constantly causes problems for his family and the people around him. He has a wife and a young daughter, but he's far from being the perfect husband or father. Still, there's one important thing to understand. Dae-su is not an evil man. He's simply immature and emotionally unstable. One rainy night, after getting drunk and spending time at a police station, his friend comes to pick him up. Outside, Dae-su uses a phone booth to call his daughter to wish her happy birthday. He apologizes for being late and promises he'll be home soon. His friend takes the phone to wish her a happy birthday as well, but when he turns around to hand the phone back, Dae-su is gone. Not dragged away, not attacked, he simply vanishes. Dae-su wakes up inside a locked room. At first he thinks it's temporary. He begs the guard outside the door for answers. He screams, he cries, he destroys the furniture. Nothing changes. Days become weeks, weeks become months, months become years. The room looks almost comfortable. There's a bed, a television, regular meals, clean room. But there's one thing missing: freedom. Every day someone slides food through a small opening in the door. No conversations, no explanations, just routine. Eventually, something far more dangerous than hopelessness happens. He adapts. The room stops feeling temporary. It becomes his entire world. What makes this disturbing is that Dae-su doesn't just survive. He slowly accepts it as normal. The room stops feeling temporary and becomes his entire world. One day, everything changes. While watching television, Dae-su sees a news report. His wife has been murdered, and according to the police, he's the killer. The evidence seems overwhelming. Investigators found his blood and fresh fingerprints on a cup at the crime scene. Considering his history of heavy drinking and constant arguments with his wife and neighbors, the case against him seems obvious. But one question remains. How did his blood and fingerprints get there? The answer is chilling. Throughout his imprisonment, sleeping gas is secretly released into his room. Every time he loses consciousness, people enter while he's asleep. They cut his hair, change his clothes, clean the room, and without him ever knowing, they collect samples of his blood and fingerprints. Those samples are later planted at the murder scene to frame him. The entire crime has been carefully staged. Realizing this, Dae-su completely breaks down. He tries to take his own life, but even that choice is taken away from him. His captors save him. Dae-su can no longer trust what he sees or even who he is. After this, something inside Dae-su changes forever. Instead of drowning in despair, he begins writing down the names of everyone he has ever argued with, hurt, or offended. Maybe one of them is responsible, but none of the names feel right. Eventually, he stops asking, "Why me?" Instead, he asks only one question: who did this to me? From that moment on, revenge becomes the only reason he continues living. He trains every single day. He punches the wall until his knuckles bleed. He practices fighting alone inside his room. He scratches a line into his body for every year that passes. And using nothing but a pair of chopsticks, he slowly begins digging through the wall, one tiny piece at a time. Revenge becomes the only thing keeping him alive. Without it, the last 15 years would feel meaningless. So his mind turns revenge into a reason to keep going. Dae-su begins repeating the same sentence to himself over and over. "I'll get out of here in 1 month." His body remains trapped inside the room, but his mind has already escaped. He imagines everything: what he'll eat, how he'll survive, whether he'll have to steal just to stay alive, anything except those fried dumplings. Then, the sleeping gas fills the room once again. His body goes limp. A mysterious woman enters. She hypnotizes him. She says, "You are standing in an endless field of green grass." And once again, his reality is rewritten. 15 years later, without warning, Dae-su is released. No explanation, no interrogation, no closure. He simply wakes up on a rooftop wearing expensive clothes. As he was wandering around the city, he was sitting and staring at the aquarium. A stranger hands him a wallet full of cash and a cell phone to him and says only one thing: "Don't ask me any questions. I don't know anything." And then he leaves. Although Dae-su is finally free, he has nowhere to go. He can't return to his family. He can't contact his old friends. To the entire world, he is still a wanted murderer. His prison may be gone, but his life is still trapped. Hungry and confused, he walks into a sushi restaurant. A young chef named Mi-do looks at him strangely. She says he looks familiar. Dae-su calmly replies, "The search for the best chef, Channel 11, Thursday at 6:30. Of course he recognizes her. Television was his only companion for 15 years. Suddenly, his phone rings. He answers. "Who are you?" Dae-su asks. He even guesses the names of several people he once knew. Each guess is rejected. Then the mysterious voice calmly says, "Find me." The line goes dead. This isn't freedom. It's the next stage of the experiment. Dae-su hasn't escaped. He's simply been moved from one prison into another. Frustrated and physically weakened, Dae-su starts eating live octopus, but his body gives out and he suddenly collapses while eating, and the young chef Mi-do brings him to her apartment. From this point on, Dae-su has only two motivations left in his life. First, to find the person who locked him inside that room, and second, to find his daughter. As he begins investigating, Dae-su discovers something unexpected. His daughter was adopted by foster parents in Stockholm. After learning this, he is devastated and wants to focus solely on finding the man responsible at any cost. But his only clue is unusual: the food he ate in prison, dumplings with a very specific taste. He follows that memory across the city, moving from restaurant to restaurant until he finally finds a match. That search leads him to a building that feels strangely familiar. Inside, he discovers many other people who were also kidnapped and imprisoned just like him. In anger and desperation, Dae-su begins torturing and interrogating one of them to find answers. But the man insists he doesn't know anything. However, he reveals that he has a recorded phone call that might help. As Dae-su tries to leave the building with the cassette recordings, he finds a group of goons waiting for him in the hallway, each armed with rods and bats. What follows is one of the most iconic fight scenes in movie history. Although the odds are against him, Dae-su has spent the last 15 years preparing for this moment. Every punch he practiced against the wall, every movement he repeated in his prison cell has led to this fight. But unlike most action movies, Dae-su isn't portrayed as an unstoppable hero. He gets exhausted, he gets injured, and several times he comes dangerously close to losing. This is exactly what makes the scene so memorable. Instead of glorifying revenge, Oldboy shows its true cost. Every punch drains Dae-su physically, and every step toward the truth demands another sacrifice. By the end of the fight, Dae-su has won, but the victory feels painful rather than triumphant. After the brutal hallway fight, Dae-su can barely stand. Covered in blood and barely able to walk, he stumbles out onto the street before collapsing to the ground. A man walks over and helps him into a taxi. He even tells the driver Dae-su's home address. As Dae-su faintly says, "Thank you," the man smiles and replies, "Not at all. Farewell, Oh Dae-su." As the taxi begins to drive away, Dae-su suddenly realizes that the stranger knew his full name. That wasn't a coincidence. That was the man he had been searching for all along. When Dae-su wakes up, he finds himself back at Mi-do's apartment. She has cleaned his wounds and wrapped bandages around his body. He immediately begins listening to the cassette recordings he took from the private prison. In the recording, the client tells the person in charge to keep Dae-su locked up for exactly 15 years, but he doesn't want him to lose his mind. The person in charge replies that they have a reliable treatment for schizophrenia called Risperdal, so Dae-su won't go insane during his imprisonment. Then, the person in charge asks the question everyone has been wondering. What did he do that deserves 15 years? The client calmly replies, "Because he talks too much." The next day, Dae-su visits his old friend who owns an internet cafe. He tells him everything that has happened over the last 15 years and plays the cassette recording. His friend doesn't recognize the voice, but he gives Dae-su one important piece of advice. Start looking at the people who were closest to you in the past. While searching through Mi-do's emails, they notice a message from someone using the name Evergreen. The message contains a strange sentence. As of yesterday, the statute of limitations has expired for Oh Dae-su. This makes Dae-su suspicious. He begins questioning Mi-do, wondering why she trusted a complete stranger enough to bring him into her apartment. Before he can ask any more questions, his friend calls. He has traced the sender's address. Surprisingly, it is located directly across from Mi-do's apartment. Dae-su rushes there and finally comes face to face with the man who locked him, but he doesn't recognize him. He introduces himself as Lee Woo-jin. Instead of attacking Dae-su, Woo-jin calmly gives him a challenge. First, find out who I am. Then find out why I imprisoned you. You have 5 days. If you discover the truth, I'll kill myself. But if you fail, I'll kill Mi-do. Every woman you've ever loved will die. Furious, Dae-su grabs Woo-jin by the throat, but Woo-jin remains completely calm. He explains that if Dae-su kills him now, he'll never learn the reason behind those 15 stolen years. Woo-jin then reveals that he has a weak heart and wears a pacemaker. He even carries a remote control that can stop his own heart whenever he wants. In other words, Dae-su cannot torture the truth out of him. Only Woo-jin controls when the truth is revealed. Before leaving, Woo-jin smiles and says one final thing. Mi-do has been alone for quite a while. Isn't her apartment door still open? Dae-su immediately realizes what that means and races back to Mi-do's apartment. When he arrives, he finds Mi-do tied up. Standing beside her is the prison manager, the same man whose teeth Dae-su brutally pulled out earlier, along with several of his men. The prison manager prepares to pull out Dae-su's teeth in exactly the same way. But before he can do it, one of Woo-jin's employees arrives carrying a briefcase full of money. Woo-jin has already paid them to let Dae-su live. Instead, the prison manager hits Dae-su with a baseball bat and leaves. As they're walking away, Dae-su shouts, "Let's fight! I'll cut off the hand that touched Mi-do." The prison manager laughs and replies, "What about my tongue?" Realizing Mi-do is no longer safe, the two leave the apartment and hide in a hotel. For the first time in 15 years, Dae-su allows himself to feel something other than anger. The two grow closer and eventually become intimate. But once again, everything is being controlled. That night, the familiar sleeping gas fills the room. Both Dae-su and Mi-do lose consciousness. A masked Woo-jin quietly enters their room. The next morning, they wake up to find a gift box. Inside is a severed hand. It belongs to the prison manager. Woo-jin has fulfilled Dae-su's promise before Dae-su even had the chance. Dae-su immediately realizes that Woo-jin has planted a listening device somewhere on him. After searching carefully, he finally discovers the bug hidden inside his shoe. Meanwhile, Mi-do continues researching the name Evergreen online. Eventually, they discover that Evergreen refers to Evergreen Oldboy High School, the school Dae-su once attended. They travel there together and find school archives. Dae-su recognizes Woo-jin's face, but still doesn't know his name. He calls his old friend and asks if he remembers Lee Woo-jin. His friend says no. While searching more, he finds a wrapped student record belonging to Lee Soo-ah. Since she has the same last name, he becomes curious and asks about her. He tells Dae-su that Lee Soo-ah was one of his classmates. However, after Dae-su transferred to another school, she died after falling into a dam. Curious, Dae-su asks what kind of person she was. His friend casually replies that people believed she had relationships with many boys at school. Unbeknownst to them, Woo-jin has been listening to the conversation. Hearing his sister insulted once again fills him with rage. He murders Dae-su's friend. Then he calls Dae-su and says, "My sister was never a slut. That's what I wanted you to understand." He explains that after Dae-su removed the listening device, he came personally to hear the conversation, and because of it, another innocent person is dead. Realizing the danger Mi-do is in, Dae-su leaves her somewhere safe and continues investigating alone. He visits an old salon and finally remembers the truth. Years ago, while they were in high school, he accidentally witnessed Woo-jin and his sister Lee Soo-ah in a forbidden romantic relationship. Before leaving for Seoul, Dae-su mentioned what he had seen to one friend and told him not to tell anyone else. But rumors have a way of spreading. One person told another, then another. Soon the entire school knew. Unable to live with the shame, Lee Soo-ah died by suicide on July 5th. That is why Woo-jin gave Dae-su exactly 5 days to reach the same date and remember the truth himself. Although Dae-su never intended for the rumor to spread, Woo-jin has spent 15 years believing that Dae-su was responsible for his sister's death. The tragedy begins with something surprisingly ordinary, a rumor. Dae-su never intended to destroy anyone's life, but the film asks an uncomfortable question. How much responsibility do we carry for consequences that started with our own careless words? Sometimes, a few careless words can destroy a life just as completely as any weapon. After learning the truth about Lee Soo-ah, Mi-do tells Dae-su, "Now that you know the reason, let's leave this place and start a new life somewhere far away." But Dae-su refuses. He cannot end everything without confronting Woo-jin one last time. He goes to Woo-jin's penthouse and reminds him of his promise. "You erased my memory and made me find the truth. Now that I've discovered the reason, it's your turn to keep your promise and take your own life." Woo-jin calmly smiles and replies, "You think I erased your memory? No, you simply forgot." He explains that after Dae-su spread the rumor, it became so exaggerated that everyone at school started believing his sister Lee Soo-ah was pregnant. Eventually, even she believed it herself. Woo-jin then says something unforgettable. "It wasn't me that made her pregnant, but it was your tongue." Then he asks Dae-su if he knows what post-hypnosis is. Post-hypnosis allows a person to plant commands deep inside someone's subconscious, causing them to act on those commands later without realizing it. Woo-jin reveals that with the help of hypnotist Miss Yu, he hypnotized both Dae-su and Mi-do. Everything that happened between them had been carefully planned. It wasn't coincidence, it was design. Woo-jin spent years creating every detail. He controlled their meetings, he controlled the timing, he manipulated their emotions, and most horrifying of all, he engineered their love. Woo-jin then tells Dae-su that his biggest mistake was asking the wrong question. Ever since he was released, Dae-su kept asking, "Why was I imprisoned for 15 years? But he never stopped to ask the real question. Why was I released after 15 years? Then Woo-jin slowly pans a light to a gift box in front of him. Woo-jin places a photo album on the table. Dae-su flips through page after page. At first, nothing seems unusual. Then he reaches the final photograph. And in that single moment, everything he believed about the last 5 days collapses. The last photograph reveals that Mi-do is his daughter. At that moment, Dae-su finally understood. The real revenge was never the 15 years of imprisonment. The real revenge was making him unknowingly fall in love with his own daughter. The truth is so unbearable that Dae-su attacks at Woo-jin. Mr. Han immediately steps in to protect his boss, and a fight breaks out. Dae-su stabs Mr. Han in the ear so he can no longer hear Woo-jin's commands. When Woo-jin orders him to stop, Mr. Han could not hear him, and unable to control the situation, Woo-jin shoots Mr. Han himself because he didn't want Dae-su to die before his revenge is complete. This is where Oldboy transforms from a revenge thriller into psychological horror. Up to this point, Dae-su believes his punishment was prison. The real punishment turns out to be emotional. Woo-jin doesn't just ruin Dae-su's body, he turns the one relationship that gave him hope into the source of his greatest horror. Woo-jin then asks Dae-su one final question. "Why did you leave Mi-do alone?" He explains that everything was part of another trap. Although he cut off the prison manager's hand, Woo-jin rewarded him with money and property. The prison manager still works for him. Panicking, Dae-su immediately calls Mi-do. She answers the phone and says there is a gift box in front of her. The prison manager is telling her to open it. Dae-su screams and asks her not to open the box because he cannot allow her to discover the truth. He promises he will be there soon before hanging up. Then Dae-su completely breaks down. Moments ago, he threatened to tear Woo-jin apart so completely that nobody would ever find his body. Now, he falls to his knees. He begs. He cries. He says he will become anything Woo-jin wants. He even gets on all fours and barks like a dog. He licks Woo-jin's shoes, hoping to save Mi-do from the truth. But Woo-jin remains unmoved. Finally, Dae-su does the only thing he believes might prove his remorse. He cuts off his own tongue. He begs Woo-jin to spare Mi-do. Satisfied at last, Woo-jin calls the prison manager and orders him to leave the gift box unopened. Then he quietly whispers to Dae-su, "What reason do I have left to live?" He drops the remote control connected to his pacemaker onto the floor. Dae-su desperately tries to stop his heart, but it did not work. As Woojin walks toward the elevator, he plays the recording of Dae-su and Mi-doo's intimate night together. He says, "My sister and I knew the truth, yet we still loved each other. Can you and Mi-doo do the same?" Inside the elevator, Woojin remembers the day his sister died. Overcome by grief, he shoots himself. With his revenge finally complete, he has no reason left to live. Dae-su cutting out his tongue is one of the film's most powerful symbols. Years earlier, his careless words destroyed another family. Now, he punishes the very thing that caused it. But even this sacrifice cannot undo the past. It only completes the cycle of guilt, revenge, and self-destruction. In the final chapter of the film, Dae-su visits Ms. Yu, the hypnotist. He begs her to erase his memories. At first, she refuses. She says she has no reason to help him. But then she reads the final words he has written. "Even though I am no better than a beast, don't I still have the right to live?" Moved by his desperation, she agrees. She warns him that hypnosis is unpredictable. It may erase everything, or it may erase nothing at all. Dae-su accepts the risk. She hypnotizes him. Later, Dae-su wakes up alone in the snow. Mi-doo finds him, runs toward him, hugs him tightly, and softly says, "I love you." Dae-su smiles. For just a moment, it looks like everything is over. But then, his smile slowly fades. His face fills with pain, and he begins to cry. The film never tells us whether the hypnosis truly worked, but what we can analyze from his facial expressions is that the hypnosis did not work. This is why Oldboy remains one of the greatest psychological thrillers ever made. It refuses to give us a comforting ending. Instead, it leaves us with one haunting question. If a single truth destroys your entire identity, is forgetting really a form of healing? Or is it simply another prison? Because in the end, the real prison was never the room. It was the truth Dae-su could never escape. If you enjoyed this explanation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know which movie you'd like me to explain next. Thanks for watching!